So welcome.
Thank you.
This is like three interviews in one, I think.
Okay.
So I want to start with, I went to your LinkedIn profile, and when you look at your early career, there weren't a whole lot of signs that entrepreneurship was in your future. Did you think you wanted it? When did you get interested in entrepreneurs?
I definitely did not want anything to do with entrepreneurship or business for a very long time. I'll basically tell like a personal story about this. For me, like growing up in a household of an entrepreneur was pain.
Yeah.
There was failure, there was financial uncertainty. My parents ultimately split up, I think, because my father was a brilliant innovator, brilliant inventor, 85 patents to his name, but he wasn't a great entrepreneur. These are different things. And so part of that, which is, a lot of this is about what we're talking about tonight, which is community or where you exist, where you're building a company. I'm from a small town in the agriculture and manufacturing belt of Ohio. I was born in 1980. That was the year manufacturing employment peaked in the United States. It's also the year that the population in my community also peaked. And so I don't know if any of you have heard of this VC turned politician, J.D. Vance. He wrote this book, Hillbilly Elegy. We grew up 20 minutes apart. So I'm from that kind of place where, people frankly on the coast read about, right? And read about in books or heard about spoken very simplistic terms during an election cycle. And I bring this up, this was actually something that I wrote, that my co-author and I, the final sort of iteration on this book, I was telling this story, and I took it out in the last edit because I was like, I'm just going to talk about this when I have a chance to be in a room with real people, because it's just getting right to the heart of my why and how ultimately becoming an entrepreneur, helping entrepreneurs in the community aspect. I want entrepreneurs everywhere to have better access to the knowledge, networks, capital, whatever is needed to succeed. It doesn't guarantee your success, but just improving the probabilities, right? Having a strong community does that. And so what I imagined was, if you kept all the conditions the same with my dad, right? No formal education, no networks, no wealth. And instead of being in this small town outside of Dayton, Ohio, we were in Palo Alto. Doesn't guarantee that he was going to succeed. In fact, most likely he wouldn't have. That's the most likely outcome. Unfortunately, we're going to skip to the end here. Most startups fail, okay? But I have to imagine that he would have been much more likely to succeed if we were in a place like that. So I went off to college, as you pointed out. I guess maybe maybe the first lesson is that place really matters. It can really shape who you become. The second lesson is you can be anything you want to be. You can remake yourself many times over. I have done that. I was very lost when I went to college. Almost got kicked out after my sophomore year. I ultimately majored in political science and history, so humanities and social science. I studied economics in graduate school. What's up? And so humanities and social sciences, I think, have served me very well. We were just having a great conversation about history. History repeats. It's taught me to think long-term, which is what we need when we're building companies or building communities. And social science has taught me over and over again that people are irrational. So that's unlearning that economics education. So yeah, and I guess kind of to tie this story together, I went to graduate school, studied economics, and my first job out of school was as an economist at the Federal Reserve. And I just happened to be based at the Federal Reserve in San Francisco. And I realized that I was completely in the wrong job. I actually hated hierarchies. I hated rules. I hated big institutions, but that's where I was fleeing for safety because of my experience as a kid. And all these amazing people around me were doing all these amazing things. This was, actually I lived through the financial crisis at the Fed, which that's a whole other story, and that's amazing. I remember when the Bloomberg terminal, the commercial paper market was like, literally there was no trading, and someone thought the Bloomberg terminal was frozen. It's like, no, the financial markets are literally frozen. So that's another story. But this was around the time that data science became a discipline. Yeah. Linear regression started to be people started calling it machine learning and these other things. And I sort of fell into entrepreneurship. I started working with entrepreneurs, started helping them, everything from product to marketing. I ultimately built, as I mentioned, I was a very reluctant entrepreneur. I was scared. I'll never forget that first Friday when I didn't have a paycheck. It scared it scared me.
Right.
And, but I closed my first contract the following week, and it was off to the races. I had a successful outcome. Sold that company to a firm in London. It allowed me to live in London for 5 years, and that's around the time I met Brad. And that might be. I'll stop there. We can pick up the next arc.
So something I heard in that. That's a great story, by the way. Number one, two things I heard. Number one, sometimes success is born of failure. You see something that doesn't work, and we tell our students this all the time. If you get discouraged when you fail, you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur. It's easy to get into that habit, but that failure sometimes is the starting point of something wonderful. So it sounds like that's one. And then two, we had a professor here who used to talk about the role of luck in being an entrepreneur. And that, I remember his name was Bill Gardner, he's at Babson now. But he talked about that to faculty, and the faculty members all harumphed. It's not about luck, it's about your skill and your ability. And that's really, in football they say, what, you make your own luck? And it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about luck, you should talk to a VC. They think it's skill. They're kidding themselves, I think it's about creating opportunities, having low ego, right? We talked about this before. The most important thing you can do is have a love and attachment for your customer, not necessarily your idea.
Right.
Your idea is usually wrong, and that's okay. It's okay. Nobody knows everything. But if the pursuit of success is what's driving you, and you can really sort of obsess over and want to deliver and love those customers, you can ultimately find a way. It's the founders that resist that, I think, that run into trouble and fail many times over.
Yeah, they fall in love. They fall in love with their idea. They fall in love with their product without having a customer.
Correct. Yeah. Ideas are, you're not the first person to think of whatever you think you're the first person to think of that thing.
It's right there in the word, right? Entrepreneur literally means one who undertakes, one who does, not one who has great ideas.
Correct.
Very cool. So you eventually find your way to Techstars.
Yeah.
Who here is familiar with Techstars? You've heard the name, right? Who here has participated in a startup weekend? So we're known for our startup weekends. We've done a couple of trick startup weekends. We had one in the middle of the mall. Do you remember that one?
We were just talking about you couldn't hear anything.
No, it was so much fun. But talk about the role that Techstar plays in encouraging entrepreneurship around the world.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Techstars is a startup accelerator program. But that's what it's most known for. It does other things like Startup Weekend. Founded in Boulder in 2006. There were numerous founders, but the main idea person was a man named David Cohen. And David was an exited entrepreneur. He had been angel investing in Boulder. And he was very frustrated by that experience. A lot of companies in Boulder, it wasn't really about deal flow, but he was looking for a way to engage more deeply with entrepreneurs. And, actually there's a more interesting story about Uber, that he was one of the first investors in Uber, and it was the co-founder Ryan who was driving through town, and that actually led to the investment. But the idea was, I want to engage more deeply with entrepreneurs in my community, and I want Boulder to be the greatest place on earth to build a software company. That was the ambition. And there's a story about actually the founding of Techstars that I think is really important in this community context, which is one of the other co-founders is a man named Brad Feld. He's actually my co-author in this book. If you're not familiar with Brad, he's sort of a legend in entrepreneurship and venture capital. Not just because he's been successful, and he's been very successful at both of those things, but because of how much he's given back to the community. So he had a blog series that turned into a book, Venture Deals, which was giving away the playbook to entrepreneurs for how you can get screwed over by a venture capitalist. Willingly or unwillingly. He was giving away the secrets, right? And I encourage all of you to have a copy of that. Just think about it. VCs do deals all day. Founders, oftentimes this could be your first and only time doing a deal. Brad also wrote, on startup communities, a bunch of other things. There's an underrated book that he wrote with his wife called Startup Life, which is how do you stay married to a crazy person called an entrepreneur? Not easy. And a bunch of other things. Anyway, Brad has created his sort of mantra for business is give first. There will be a book coming out, hopefully this year or next, about that. And give first is this idea that you want to try to find ways to help people without expecting something in return. We had a conversation earlier about this, about the puritanical roots of capitalism and how really it's about, helping people and, just doing the right thing if you can. You can't always help someone, but if you can, do your best to try to do that. I think it's a really good blueprint for life. I don't like having a ledger, like you owe me X and I did Y for you, and it's just like, well, the belief is if I care about this thing, right? If I care about my family, if I care about my kids, I take indignities all day. I have young children. I'm not getting any respect in my house. No one's paying me back today, but I care about this thing. So if I give to it, it's going to give to me. I don't know how, I don't know when and what form, but if I really care about this thing, I will give to it. And that was sort of Brad's view about entrepreneurship in Boulder. Sort of like his patriotic duty, as he described it to me once. And so, back to the Techstars founding, by this point, Brad was like, I would say, legit famous VC in the US. Super busy person, but he did something for the community. Once a month, he had this event called Random Days. And he would meet with anyone from the community for 20 minutes.
That's awesome. Super
busy person, no way that person would talk to me. And I want to come back to that statement I just made, because that happened with us. And one day, this man named David Cohen put time on Brad's calendar. It took 3 months to get in. And he walked in and pitched him on this idea called Techstars. And Brad said, unless you're a crazy person or a crook or something like that, I'm in. And I would say, Brad, if you ever see this, I hope I'm not, putting words in your mouth, but I believe that Techstars for him is his most proud accomplishment. So he was giving to his community, and he arguably got one of the most important things in his life back in return. So that's a super powerful lesson. And I would say that ethos is embedded in all of what Techstars does. My venture firm, our motto is mentorship-driven venture capital. Mentorship is sort of at the center of how you bring this idea of give first into action. The Techstars accelerator programs are really driven by the quality of the founders. They take 10 or now 12 companies, So highly curated, high touch. Unlike YC, those programs are really big. And Techstars is in 50 locations today. I think it's they're kind of pulling back a little bit on the geos, but you have to have a strong program manager. That's called a managing director. But really, it's the value of those mentors. And I will say, last thing I'll say on the power of mentorship is that you never know where value can be unlocked. So Techstars does something called used to be called Mentor Madness. Now it's called Mentor Magic. It's all about positioning. There's your marketing right there. I'm for hire. So these companies come in and they're super frustrated because they're going to do they want to do this program, but they don't realize that they're actually going to give up building their companies for 12 weeks, which is super frustrating for an entrepreneur.
Right.
And then the first 3 weeks, you come in and they say, you're going to spend 3 days per week over these 3 weeks doing day-long speed dating. And it just pisses them off. And they get so angry. And they're like, wow, this is a waste of time. And my reaction to that is that they always end up acknowledging that they were super wrong. Innovation is not efficient. You have to be willing to tolerate a fair amount of waste in order to get those right connections, those right sparks. And so you go through this process of speed dating. There have been numerous occasions, myself included, where on paper, I sit down with an entrepreneur and I say, I have the first idea what you do. I don't know how to help you. And so we just talk about something else. And invariably, I either know someone that they need to meet that would have no connection to my industry expertise. Yeah. Maybe it's I heard one story, it was the neighbor of some VP at Warner Brothers, which was like the one person they wanted to meet. Or we have a chemistry, and I can mentor you in a different way. So it's not just about, hey, how do I, fill the top of my funnel for enterprise software, right?
But it's almost always, it's never the mentor who you think is going to be the best fit for the founder. It's only through that discussion that you find it.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's Techstars is really it's an innovation company that puts entrepreneurs at the center of everything. It believes in give first as a governing philosophy, and that really gets brought into action through mentorship.
Yeah, that give first principle is incredibly important. And what we've realized over the years is that if you were brought up Christian, it's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But if you look at any major religion, any culture, helping your neighbor, it's also an important part of Lutheranism. Helping your neighbor is the lowest common denominator of human decency. And when it comes to this very risky undertaking that a founder is starting with, it's that much more important.
Yeah, and so, not to get into the whole Silicon Valley talk track, which gets overused a lot, how do we become Silicon X, Y, Z? There's a really important lesson from Silicon Valley. We talk about it in the book. We're actually referencing another person's book, an academic from UC Berkeley named Annalise Saxenian. She was actually the dean of the information school, but she's trained as an urban theorist. Urban economist, maybe. Her PhD dissertation was on comparing Boston's Route 128 corridor with Silicon Valley. Out of the post-war period, post-World War II, Boston was way better positioned to lead ultimately, the information technology revolution. But Silicon Valley, which was sort of a backwater still at that point, pulled ahead. And she really distilled it. There's a bunch of reasons for this, but she really distilled it down to a culture of collaboration as being the difference, right? People putting the cause over any one person or company or institution, and people always sort of like this permissionless sort of collaboration. She called it collaborative competition. And an openness, and that left the entrepreneurs, the companies, the universities better able to adapt to rapid technology change. And so that's really it. It's actually very simple.
It is very simple. It can get complicated in the execution, but the rules are pretty simple. And Brad, by the way, Brad touched this community too. When Gerhard was starting the center, you reached out to Brad, right? Brad, we had a summit for all the community organizers on the Central Coast, and Brad, he Skyped in, right? I think that was back when Skype was a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, and told us about what goes into a good startup community, which also goes to show how one person can have an outsized influence on the world.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that in the book. This is one of the things when you think about, there's so much about ecosystem building and community building, which is challenging to the human mind.
Yeah.
But I think the most obvious recipe for success, not easy to create, but simple to understand, is one, entrepreneurial success, however defined, and the people behind that success care that the next generation behind them also has a better shot at success.
Right.
It's dead simple.
Yep, for sure.
And Brad's one of those people.
Yeah. So Brad wrote a book called Startup Communities. It's our Bible. And then the follow-on book was Startup Community Way, which it almost felt like, I used the book in class, it felt like you got to come full circle because it's very much, it feels like an economist view of how this really complicated ecosystem works.
Yeah. So first I should say, just because I think this is really important, this thread we're pulling on about service and when leaders actually help people and they're accessible. So it's 2016. I had a 2-year fulfillment with the company that acquired me in London. I was very unfulfilled and thinking about what was next. But I loved working with entrepreneurs. I don't think that I'm a great founder. I know that what my path is working with founders. And you don't have to be a great founder to support founders. It's really important to know what you're good at and what you're not so good at. I have a hard time obsessing over one thing for a long period of time, and that's exactly what you need to do to be a successful founder. I think entrepreneur is a different term, at least how we think about it. So I was searching for, I was basically advising large, Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies in tech and software, in finance, even in creative industries. And it was miserable. But I was spending like my nights and weekends working with founders. And I thought, how can I bring these two things together? And my wife, who is much smarter than me, said, well, who do you respect most that's doing this? And I'm like, well, there's this guy in Colorado. We've exchanged a few emails because I was doing this writing on ecosystems and, trends and startups and all this stuff for fun. And she said, why don't you just reach out to him? And so I finally did. And he responded that day and sent me his phone number. He said, call me. And we got to talking. And then, I guess a few weeks later, he called me back and he said, I got an idea. You think differently from me. I think my work is not done on startup communities. I think we should write a book together, and then you should come to Techstars and build a business there with me. And I'm, of course, like starstruck at that point. And it was amazing. And, that event changed my life forever. And so I guess to skip forward to, the book and how it's different, Brad wrote this book in 2012 called Startup Communities. And it was really it was a very practical guide targeted at founders. Here are some very specific things you can do to try to build a startup community, improve your startup community. It was told through the lens of Boulder, which some people found that limiting because Boulder is sort of this idealistic place. But at the same time, forget about all of the assets that Boulder has for a moment. It is extremely collaborative. So my point is universities are more ubiquitous than high growth startups. Smart people are more ubiquitous than high growth startups, right? they concentrate. And it's for lots of reasons, but one of the things you can actually control, which is an important lesson for entrepreneurs, focus on the things you can actually control. It's just being more collaborative, being more open, helping people, connecting people, sharing ideas, right? Being a source of support. This is really hard, right? Boulder is off the charts. My experience, I went and lived there for a little while my wife was on maternity leave to work on this book and get to know Brad better. And that was my big takeaway. Boulder is getting as much juice out of that lemon as they can possibly get.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we wrote about 30,000 words and we hated it and we threw it away because I was doing my own customer discovery. I was traveling all around the world. I was talking to these people. And the conclusion we reached was not that founders needed so much more help on how to build founder-led communities. It's that on the back of this giant bull market we had in technology and entrepreneurship, there were so many more resources being plowed into it. There were so many more actors engaging. Corporations were getting more involved, universities, governments, and so on. And those are hierarchical organizations,
mm-hmm.
and they struggle with how to engage in a healthy way with innovation, with bottoms-up experimentation, learning, right? They're fundamentally different mindsets. It's not that the people don't know, because they're living this every day. If you've ever driven in traffic or raised a child, you understand, sort of how to be flexible and adaptive and to not be rigid around a plan. But the organizations don't think that way. And so this book, we felt, was needed to sort of, it gives a lay of the land, but we injected quite a bit of practical systems thinking so that those folks could have a better understanding, that kind of that innate sense that founders have, right? All successful founders are systems thinkers. They have to be. Yeah. And we were just trying to get them to think a little bit more like an entrepreneur if they want to service the entrepreneurs better. And so that was really the evolution. The target was for everyone else, less for the founders, but I think it's for founders too.
Yeah, and I think we see that here too. That and an issue we had with Brad's original book was that emphasis on the entrepreneur. If you're just getting started, you don't have that core of leadership, and you have to grow it. And it requires people in the community who understand. Startup Communities was really popular in Santa Barbara, but it also was reviled by the support people in the community because Brad divided the world into two parts, leaders and feeders. And that word feeder, people took as bottom feeder, that you were somehow feeding off the entrepreneurs, when it was the other way around.
Yeah.
But getting started is hard. And then once you get started, it kind of becomes this flywheel, almost like a chain reaction, that is difficult to measure. That's something I thought was interesting in the Startup Community Way book, is a successful startup community, it can be difficult to measure how it's doing.
Yeah. Well, because the things that matter are really, they're intangible.
Yeah.
So we were having this discussion earlier about, in the healthcare context, it's easy to measure inputs, right? We can probably count up how many people are here, right? But can we really measure what the impact of this evening was?
Yeah.
Whether it's someone made a key connection here, maybe I said one thing that was intelligent and you learned from it and thought about it and did something differently, I don't know. But it might happen over a very long period of time. And it might even be more that something I've said that you relayed to someone else which actually had the impact. It's basically impossible. There are long time lags associated with this. One of the things that was different about this book too is that we told the stories. We had other people from other places write stories. And one of my favorites is by this entrepreneur named Scott Dorsey. He's in Indianapolis. He's the founder of a company called ExactTarget, which is a digital marketing company. He founded it in 2000 in Indianapolis. Wow. Terrible. I think he said there was one venture deal in Indiana, and it was his. Terrible timing, terrible location, wrong. But the people behind that company, they did three great things. First of all, they were building a community while they were building, actually I'd say an ecosystem while they were building the firm. They were focused on the founder community in Indianapolis, but they were also building relationships with universities in the state and customers, right? Large corporations. The second thing they did was they built an amazing company. 2015, ExactTarget was sold to Salesforce for $2.5 billion. 15 years later, Salesforce Tower in Indianapolis. I think it employs around 2,000 people now in Indianapolis, Salesforce. Maybe it's been reduced recently. But then the third thing was that Scott and his colleagues didn't go home. They doubled down. They created High Alpha, which is a venture studio, venture fund, corporate innovation lab, a bunch of things. And what's really amazing about it is their ambition. They want Indianapolis to be the greatest place on earth to build B2B SaaS.
Yeah.
Will they ever achieve that? I don't know. Depends how you define it, but probably not. But
Does it really matter?
no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson, right?
Yeah.
Like, it can, first of all, the success can happen anywhere. It can be really random. But what matters is it's not that the success happened, it's what happened after it. What are those people doing? What is their ambition? And one thing I want to repeat is that 2015, basically 2020, 22, High Alpha starts really, shaping into what it ultimately is. That's a generation. That's a long-term commitment to a place and to a mission. And, that's one of the things that we struggle with because we want the fruits of our labor today. But it takes time.
How long?
A generation.
A generation.
That's a lifetime. I mean,
So that's 50, 60 years?
whatever
Yeah.
the way I like to think about it is have the ambition to say, I want X. Whether your community is based around a product or a domain or a city, I want to be a part of this for the rest of my life. I think that's the ambition.
Coming back to the liberal arts, there's a certain amount of philosophy in this, right? That it's not about math and science necessarily, even though a community almost feels like an organism. It's an attitude, it's a code of conduct, and it's a set of values that are shared that results in the success over a long period of time.
Correct.
Excellent. So now that, when did you publish the book?
Speaking of great timing, July 2020, right in the middle of COVID. Awesome book tour. So great. One of the things that was neat about that was that I got to reach more people. I guess. Maybe I should redefine reach, but I didn't get this. That was a terrible tragedy of that for me. And also I got to see society decline in this really unique way. I actually haven't talked about this before, but imagine I did book talk after book talk, like 3 or 4 a day, which is like way too many, for probably 2 months. Maybe it was more of an average of 3, okay, of work days. And I slowly watched society pay attention to just really fading out. And I would just be talking to no one. Now, maybe it was just because I was boring or whatever, but I really, in that moment, I thought, people think that we're going to replace the in-person connection. And we're not. I think we have a new way of creating, sparking, and maintaining relationships, but there is no substitute for this. My strong preference is to initiate relationships at an arm's length, at least in the first or second meeting. You can scale them then after that, but I don't think you can really, it's hard to have that deep connection. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, it does. Like, there are founders that are building great companies that haven't met yet. I think we'll see if that stands the test of time. But yeah, sorry, long-winded way of saying it was in 2020.
So one,
Got
of
sidetracked.
one of my favorite words in the English language, serendipity. You really, it's hard to plan for, and it's even hard to identify until it happens to you.
Yeah, well, think about it this way. Has anyone ever been set up on a date? It never works, right? I mean, first of all, someone's setting you up, they're planting this on your mind, there's an expectation, and then it throws everything off. If you really want two people to get together, put them in a room and just let nature take its course.
Right.
How many times people on paper are a perfect match, whether it's romantically, whether it's business-wise, whatever, and they just, or mentor madness. You either have a chemistry or you don't. Right? And we can't engineer that. We can create opportunities. And that's one of the key ways where hierarchical organizations have struggled because they want to be the solution. They want to engineer outcomes, and you just cannot do that. You can build platforms that allow for serendipity to take shape, increasing probabilities. And there's not a lot more you can do than that.
Do you think there's a use case in here for AI at some point down the road? Because it seems to be really good at critical thinking, and at discovering facts that you either had forgotten or didn't realize were true. Do you think that there's a case in the foreseeable future, whatever, 5-10 years, where you can talk to AI and AI keeps a record of who it's spoken to and finds you that deep connection?
AI for building connections in the community?
Yeah.
I don't know. Not for me.
Yeah, there's no substitute, right?
I think it can sort of, it can help you sort of, narrow down a decision set, right? But it's, for this kind of stuff, no.
It's human.
Yeah.
It's a human activity.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. So let's move on to the most recent part of your career, and that's as a venture capital, Far Out Venture. I love that name.
Yeah, thanks.
So tell us a little bit about what Far Out Ventures does, what your investment thesis is.
Yeah.
A little bit more about mentor-driven venture capital.
Yeah, so I'll start with that part because I think it's the most important part. There are a million venture capital firms. There are a million firms with our thesis. We're not special in that way. But our North Star is that we always look for ways to help founders. Not just our portfolio companies, but I'll stop there for a second and say, a lot of VCs say we're going to help you. They don't. I don't think they're lying. I just think they mean well, but they're, busy, or they don't know how to help. A lot of people don't know how to say, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. And there are a bunch of reasons, but we really help our companies in every single way. We spend a lot of time with them, not just like product, go-to-market, tactical stuff, but emotional things, like how's your family and how's your relationship with your co-founder? What can we do to help you with all these things? But we also have an ethos, which is we are very honest with founders who do not fit our profile, and we will look for ways to help you. We have a very specific thesis. We only invest in B2B software companies. We love vertical software, especially. We like, SMB SaaS, enterprise, fintech, and some marketplaces. If you're not any of those things, we are not even going to give you a second look. But I will take a meeting with you. Maybe I can help you, or more importantly, maybe I know someone else who can help you or would like to consider you for an investment. And so that's what we do. I have to imagine other firms do that, but probably not that many. And that's kind of our governing philosophy. We invest at pre-seed and seed, more pre-seed. And we're looking for companies outside of Silicon Valley generally. We don't play that game. That's a game that we're never going to win. It's not in our DNA. It's not in our networks, really. We know a lot of funds further downstream, and so for our best companies, I can take them to the big funds in Silicon Valley. But most founders don't need that. A lot of our founders are first-time founders. They come from ecosystem. They come from Ohio. They come from Indiana. They come from Ventura County, like whatever. And so those are the kind of the founders we're looking for. Let's see what else.
So pre-seed, you're investing really early.
Yeah. So
what do the deal terms look like? Do you fix your deal terms, or is there some back and forth negotiation at that stage?
It depends on a couple of things. Like we don't have a fixed check size. We look for sort of target ownership. So we're targeting about 5% ownership at entry, which for pre-seed makes us oftentimes the biggest check. We don't like to call ourselves a lead. We will jump in before anyone else. We don't care who else is in the round. Irrelevant. We don't take board seats. We feel like if we want to really know what's going on in the company, we need to not be on the board. We want to be the voice that helps the founders get ready for their board, right, when they actually form one. We would encourage you to not form a board as long as possible. They usually just do more damage.
We're a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
I'm on a couple of boards. So
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody would want one.
No, that's not really what we're in it for, But we will help structure it. So I think the most important ways we act like a lead, and in other, I think, ways that are not important to us, we don't act like a lead.
Yeah.
So at seed, 5% ownership, that's usually second fiddle, sometimes third.
So you're more interested in being first than being the lead. It's an interesting.
Well, we're not necessarily interested in being first. We're just interested in arriving at our own decision, whether or not anyone else agrees with it.
Yeah.
We don't want to be signal chasing investors. Who else is in? I don't care. I care that the round is properly capitalized.
Yeah.
Okay? I've made that mistake before. So it's not like, cool, sign and wire, let's go. It's like, okay, how much do you need to raise in this round? We're going to help you raise this round. So it's not about being first. It's just about being an independent thinker and having high conviction, regardless of whoever else is in.
But you're setting the terms for the round, right? If you're first.
Not always. I mean, we're usually investing on safes, which is kind of the Wild West. Founders can do pretty much whatever they want. We don't allow for that. We don't fight too hard on valuation. There's no science to it at that stage.
Yeah.
It's really supply and demand, maybe some adjustment for the type of business they're building, or really the experience of the founders. So I think lowest valuation I was in the last, first check pre-seed was 3.5 in Mexico. Highest was 15, but that founder was a unicorn founder, raised $4 million in 2 weeks, didn't even have a bank account set up.
Wow.
So,
Very cool.
That's how we like to invest. We know that we're good to Series A, and then we can't help you much. There are other people who want to form boards and sit on those boards who can do that.
Yeah. So what?
Maybe advice.
Yeah, that's last.
Okay.
I have one more question before that. Where do you think Far Up Ventures goes? Is this the last job you'll ever have, or do you think that the VC bug will run its course and you move on to something else, or you just haven't looked that far?
I really want this to be my last job.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to be true anymore. Whether we're successful or not, right now I think market conditions are really difficult. Everything's connected, right? This is a system, and founders I know get frustrated at VCs for lots of very valid reasons. Right now is a particularly frustrating time, but it's really hard for us right now. Raising money is really hard.
Yeah.
It's the hardest enterprise sales that you'll ever do in your life.
I think some people don't realize that VCs are fundraising themselves. It's not like they've got a pot of money that they found in their backyard that they're investing. They've got to go find investors.
Yeah, and ultimately, we're service providers, okay? We're intermediaries. Someone needs to disrupt this industry and kick us all out.
Yeah.
But any VC that acts like they're, kingmakers is ridiculous. We're service providers. We're actually matching the capital with the entrepreneurs. And I think it's important to be humble about that and remember, really the role that you're playing. But it's tough. And so this is something very successful fund managers who are, so you're generally called an emerging manager if you're in your first 3 funds. We're on our first fund. So we're just kind of getting started, figuring it out, making a lot of mistakes, hacking together systems and Airtable, just like all of you. And we'll see.
Yeah.
I think I know empirically we're doing well, but that may not be well enough. And so we'll see. I want this to be my last job, but it's, the last couple of years have been concerning.
Yeah, there's no telling. So we have a number of entrepreneurs in the audience, pre-seed, seed stage. What advice would you have for them when engaging a venture capitalist?
Fill your funnel. Qualify your funnel. Assume that 2% is your hit rate. The substantial majority are not going to work out. So it is a shots on goal thing, but I will really stress qualifying the leads. I cannot stress this enough. We are very explicit on our website exactly what we fund. And I still get inbound on things that are so far out of that it's, I don't know, they didn't read it, they didn't, whatever. And it's not just qualifying a firm. It's qualifying, we invest collaboratively as a group because we're different, we think different, and that model works for us. For most funds, it does not work that way, right? It's like being in a golf league. You just go out, play your round, post your score, that's it. So who at that firm invests in what you are building? Find out who the principal at big firms, the lower level staffers, the associates, the principals, those are your best friends. And I'll stress that last point again, don't be transactional. You're building a relationship. And I know that gets, played a lot, but it's true. There's a person. And that person, it's not just about being nice. You're not trying to, create best friends in your life. But that is a human being with a psychology and motivations and getting into their mindset and what is valuable to them. Final thing I'll say on that, which is my advice for all entrepreneurs, is if you want someone to do something, make it dead simple for them. So that means data room. I cannot talk about this enough. Your data room should be amazing, well organized, beautiful. Try to speak the language of the investor. Slide decks, that became the standard. One of the things that's been really effective for me is seeing founders write investment memos. That's what we have to do that. We write most funds write investment memos, which is stating the case for why you want to make this investment. So founders are doing it for them. Not that the firm is taking that memo and substituting it, but they're relying on it. FAQs. Every time a VC asks you a question, log that, provide a thoughtful answer, and include it in the data room. Just reduce the number of meetings, increase the speed to close or for them to pass, right? Make it easy. This is really simple stuff. And don't, I guess the last thing is do not take it personally when you get rejected. There are a million reasons why people will reject you, even if you're a perfect fit for them. There are partner dynamics. There are, right now, funds are sort of holding back because they want to get better time diversification in their last fund because they over deployed at the peak. There's a million reasons, and it's not about you. Sometimes it's about you, right? They don't like what you're doing. Maybe they don't like you. That's okay. It doesn't matter what they think. But don't take it personally.
Yeah, you just need one yes.
One yet, well, again, sorry to say this, it's generally an industry of lemmings.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's like a joke to say, well, who else is in? Well, if you get someone in, especially if you get a lead, the dominoes fall.
Yeah.
So it's a numbers game. Qualify your leads. Be patient. Don't take it personally. Try to humanize that other person on the other end, and have fun. Like you're sharing your vision about how you want to change the world. That's a blessing.
With an emphasis on the relationship, that it can't just be about the money.
Yeah, exactly. And just also because if I have a positive experience with you, I might remember you down the line.
Right.
There's a great framework that's just like, this is a little off track, but that, do you know Rick Tarosi in Portland? Okay. Rick Tarosi is this phenomenal community builder in Portland, Oregon. And his framework for all of community building is, he calls it collecting and connecting dots. And he says, I'll take a meeting with basically anybody. 20 minutes, coffee, whatever. And because, this is how he describes it about himself. A lot of times I have nothing to provide this person. But that's not true because Rick is super knowledgeable, super connected, super empathetic. And he's collecting a dot. He's collecting you, he's collecting your story. And then because he collects so many of those dots, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, there's a spark and he's like, oh, that person I met that one day needs to meet this other person. Or I saw this concept that they were describing and there's this unique insight maybe I can relay to them. So the same thing with investing or raising money. You're collecting dots and hopefully a few of those connect.
I love that, collecting and connecting dots. So speaking of which, who'd like to become a dot in Ian's network? Who has a question for Ian? I think we've... Yeah, okay.
Yes, this is my natural hair.
Well, anyways, so one thing that I really resonated with me is fall in love with the audience and not fall in love with the product. And I'm sure you've probably seen this time and time again. I'd love for the audience to hear maybe a nuanced story where someone fell in love with the product instead of falling in love with the audience, and then fell in love with the audience versus the product, so that founders can really understand that nuance.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of, I guess this is the first one, but an entrepreneur who had nothing to do with healthcare, but his son became sick. And so, unfortunately, it wasn't a good outcome. And so he changed everything and is spending the rest of his life pursuing a cure for what wasn't available to his family.
Yeah.
So that's like an extreme example. But I think, as a principle, it's not just fodder. Like, it doesn't matter what you think. It matters what the customer thinks. Now, some people, geniuses like Steve Jobs, can say, actually, it matters what I think, and I'm going to teach them how to think. But you're not Steve Jobs. Sorry. And I really mean that. I think the most successful, DNA founders, they end up building lots of companies in very different domains because they're low ego. They're not attached to the idea. They want to succeed, right? And I think that's it. Maybe that's another way of saying what we were talking about just now about dealing with investors, being low ego. Low ego, a lot of times, isn't synonymous with entrepreneurs, right? A lot of big egos. Self-confidence is important. But what I really mean is having non-attachment really to anything, and just pursuing, the truth.
Thank you for that. As a co-founder of a startup company in fiber optics in Cambria, not too far from here in 2000, I want to know your opinion about the risk versus the rewards. I have to bear the risk as well as enjoy the rewards because I was a I was in that situation. How do you, in your experience, interpret that? Risk versus reward of any entrepreneurship.
Well, I guess maybe the way I'll answer that, and if you don't like my answer, we can keep going, is this. I think generally the most successful entrepreneurs are not thinking about the reward. They're thinking about the problem that they're solving. It's an abusive relationship, like building a company. It's difficult, right? Mental health problems, financial problems, social isolation. I mentioned before, my own parents ultimately split up, which affected me, which affects my kids, which affects their kids. So there are a lot of risks in that regard, but the best, I'll actually steal the term from Brad, is like, and I use this all the time, which is, I really want to find founders who are obsessed with the problem to the point where they just cannot envision the world without this solution existing. And I don't want to over dramatize that because you don't want like a psychosis. You don't want people being super unhealthy. But really what it's trying to get at is that because the most likely outcome is failure, because it takes forever, because there's so many setbacks, because everyone doubts you, because you're isolated, because of all that, if you are not obsessed enough with that problem, you won't make it, right? And so, I don't know, there are lots of risks, and for some people there's a lot of reward, but if you're in it for that, you're not going to get it anyway because, I just don't see the perseverance with all those ups and downs along the way.
Fun fact, across the hall from us, Cal Lutheran has a community counseling center where grad psychology students learn to be therapists. So we're one of the few co-working spaces that has therapy built in.
Well, grad school is probably the most abusive place on earth, but let's not go into that.
Hi, Emery Petty. I'm curious because there's sole founders and there's 2 or 3 co-founders in many cases. So any success and failure patterns that you've observed, whether there's 1, 2, or 3 founders, and then the dynamics between personality and skill sets coming in the room.
Oh yeah, co-founders are the biggest problem with every startup. It's the number one reason startups fail. Second is that no one wants to buy what they're making. And then everything else is like a distant third, fourth, fifth. I wish more founders would listen to me. In fact, we may mandate this with an investment. I encourage all founders to, if it feels right, to not only like get a gym membership, if it feels right to do therapy, but for sure, do coaching.
Yeah.
And at least, at the absolute minimum, group coach amongst the 2 of you or 3 of you.
Yep.
Because you don't get it out, or if you do, you're going to vomit it all over your spouse or your family members or whatever. That's what you do. You go home and you ruin that relationship instead. The only thing harder than having co-founders is doing it alone. That's a journey that I was on. I could tell you about my experience. I was definitely less successful because of that with my company than I could have been. The company that acquired me saw that and took advantage of that, and they're doing great in ways that I hadn't imagined, and that's amazing. And I just feel like you internalize more. It just affects you more, and so it's okay if you're a solo founder. Build a team around you. Like, take care of yourself. I wouldn't recommend it. I think better, more novel solutions emerge when we're combining it with diverse people, diverse experiences, diverse mindsets. But yeah, TLDR, take care of yourself, I guess, whether you're alone or doing it with other people.
So this is a practical question. So as I said, you're raising pre-seed. So as an obsessive person, so I started studying all the resources about like how do you go about talking to investors. So you read like all these different, recommendations from PG to like I read Scott Moore's, book and recent kind of book, Hustle Fund. So they all say pre-seed is about the team and it's about you. So I go to meetings and I try to present myself, and then I realize I didn't talk much about the business. And the next time I go talk about business, and I didn't talk about me. It's only 20 minutes to talk to someone and get a coffee. So I'm totally confused where to start. Like, what should I do? Like, if I want to talk to them, how do I find out where to start? Am I pitching me? Am I pitching my business? I only have 20 minutes. How far? What's the spectrum?
Well, generally when you're getting conflicting advice, I would say listen to yourself. Don't listen to too many people. If you read everything on this subject and talked to every person, you would have no idea what to do.
That's right.
It's all different. I guess I would say, like, I just think about relationships. Like, if you want to get, what's that old adage? Like, if you want to get money, ask for advice, and if you want to get advice, ask for money. Just like try to connect with someone, and maybe don't pitch the company right away, right? Like, we know there's a transaction that is going to transpire. That's why we're talking. You want money, I have to deploy money. That's part of the job, but it is that first step in building a relationship, and I think quite simply we like working with people we like.
Right.
Now, this is a somewhat controversial topic. I don't know why, but because I guess when you have a fiduciary to your limited partners, your job is to find the best investment opportunities, period, full stop. Not for me. I work really closely with founders. I have to have a chemistry with you. I think there are enough great companies in my thesis that I can find that I still have that connection with. And so when people say it's about people, I don't really believe that fully. If that's the only rationale, then I think they're making investments on pedigree, which sounds like closed networks, which actually really chokes off innovation. I understand why they're saying people, because you have nothing else. Remember when we all graduated college, somehow you managed to fill up a full-page resume with just worthless information. I don't have anything else. It's just me. I guess pre-seed companies kind of like that. But chances are I don't know much about your market. Maybe this is another thing I should add too, like really focus on the problem you're solving. Unless you're doing something deep tech or healthcare where the product is everything, the market takes care of itself. Explain to me what the problem you're solving is. Your product is probably generic, sorry, but the risk is on market and execution. So get me excited about that. Teach me something, right? I'm going to have to learn something. And back to the earlier thing I said was make it easy for me. Make it easy for me to get excited about you as a person. Make it easy for me to understand what you're doing. Assume I know nothing about what you're doing. I probably don't.
Okay, we've got two more questions
Sure.
lined up, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, my name's Ayla. And what role do you think vulnerability plays in entrepreneurship, and do you see it as a strength or a weakness?
It's a necessity. I mean, not that I'm acting, but I think you've seen many moments where I've been very open about my life, personal things. Everything's an open book. And it's not for affect, it's something I've learned. My hope is that it will show you that it gives people permission to be vulnerable as well. One of the things that I tell entrepreneurs when I'm doing mentor magic, it's whatever. I'm spending a morning, I'm going to do it in a few weeks at Techstars LA. That program is run out of Culver City, I think. Yeah.
Bioscience LA.
What's that?
It's going to be at Bioscience LA, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay. I tell people, first thing I say is, I'm not an investor today. Because they're pitching me, and I don't want to be pitched. I need to know what's wrong with your company. I need to know what's bothering you, what you need help with. And you can't do that if you're pitching me. right? And so that's also part of why we have this approach where we don't take board seats. And I've had founders tell us, hey, we're coming to you because we can't actually talk about this with our lead because they're on the board. Can you help us figure out this problem? It takes, you have to build trust with people, right? But what I would say, just as, kind of as a principle to go back to what we talked about, the importance of leadership, lead with vulnerability. Do the thing that you want other people to do. Just do it. Maybe they'll be uncomfortable, maybe they won't want to reciprocate. I fully respect if people don't want to share intimate details about their life, but you can do that with me and you can trust me with that. I'm trusting you with it as well. So that's my only advice is, be real. Don't BS people. They're going to figure it out eventually anyway, and there's a lot of pressure, for founders to do that. Just lead with it,
Thank you. Last question. Thanks for your presentation, particularly for sharing your story, what you've had, and your background. And I really enjoyed the resources you shared throughout about different community leaders in different spaces and the books that you shared. You referenced the gym and kind of this idea of how you keep yourself stronger physically or what you could do. I'm wondering what you equate that to in terms of your thinking, let's say. How do you kind of refresh, or because it seems like a lot of what entrepreneurs are looking for. It's also a moving target. Things are changing societally, but also perhaps in the market. So I'm wondering if there's some things that you do or habits or strategies if you will.
Well, I have young kids, so don't do that. It's a terrible idea for your health.
Don't listen to that person.
No, I'm sure it'll be different for you. I'm addicted to work. I get addicted to my computer. There's always something to do. There's always emails to do. There's always like a spreadsheet to fiddle with, a CRM to fill out. And it's a waste, right? I've missed out on a lot of things. You can get sucked into that machine. So the things that I do, I could eat better. I have a personal trainer. I go to therapy every week. I do coaching. I'm actually starting training to be a certified professional coach. I start in a few weeks. I'm not going to coach the founders in our portfolio. I'm going to be inspired by that. I think it's a line you don't want to cross, but I spend a lot of time in nature. I live in Santa Barbara, so that's pretty easy to do. But more fundamentally, I just block time. So Tuesday is a personal day for me. It didn't really start out that way, but it kind of there were a bunch of things that were lining up on Tuesdays. My personal training at 6 a.m., I had therapy. My kids had practices kind of stacked. And so I thought, this is just going to be my day. I'm going to take my kids to their practices. This is just going to be my day. And I'm sure I make up for it late at night when everyone's asleep. I wake up at 4 a.m. and work. There's some unhealthiness in there, but I block time for my health and my family. Probably should do more for my friends, but that's really it. Because you know how it is. You can just get sucked into it and that machine, and then don't do that.
Can we give Ian a big round of applause?
This is perfect. We have a gift for you, but it requires a little bit of an explanation. You see the signs behind you, those pop-up signs you see everywhere? They're made out of this thick vinyl. And in our case, we use them a lot. We have a new venture competition where we give our students the opportunity to create something that big to see what it looks like. But they're used once and they end up in our closet. So we had a local company called Rare Form, which makes bags out of billboards, make bags out of our old signs. So they came out, they're a little small.
Oh, amazing.
So I gave you two, but and there's some swag inside, but thank you so much for your time and for the advice. This is very much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I love this. It means a lot to me to be here, and I just want to leave you all with one challenge. It's the same challenge I give every place I come and speak with and meet. Find one way to help one entrepreneur. Maybe not tonight. You should probably go home and see your family, take care of yourself, get some sleep. But just one simple thing, and then ask them to do the same thing. It's very simple. Anyone can do it, and I think that's probably like one of the most powerful and simple ways to plug in and a message of inclusivity for anybody. I want anyone, whether you're a founder or not, you can be supportive of the startup community by just doing simple acts of generosity and connectedness. So find one way to do that in the next week, please, for me. Thank you.
We'll check in on you.